There are no people in the future.
There are no people.
There are no people in the future.
No people at all.
There are no people in the future.
Where did all my people go?
There are no people in the future.
Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey everybody, welcome. It is Monday, August 8th, 2022. Welcome to Raging Chicken's Out to Coop Live. This is, of course, Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. On Out to Coop Live, we talk to progressives, activists, and troublemakers of all sorts, right from our own backyard and from across the country. You can join us also at the end of the week for our Friday Politics Roundup, where we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. And you can check out our once or twice monthly The Wednesday Show with Cyril Michaleko. Cyril is the editor-in-chief of the Bucks County Beacon, and he joins me to drill down into Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and international politics. You can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. We're there. We're just there. You just got to click, join, you're it. There you go. And you can help support this show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress to become a patron today. You can also help out the show by getting on over to our YouTube channel if you're not there already. Smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time that we go live. You can join our Discord server. Lots on that happening starting up this fall especially, so get on it now. Info on that is in tonight's show notes. For more PA Progressive talk, tune into the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern on his YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook. Look, wherever you get your stream, Rick's going to be there. Head on over to thericksmithshow.com for the latest across all his platforms. And you got to check out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast if you haven't already. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house. And they know where the bodies are buried. You got to check them out on Twitter at The Night Caucus. That's at The Night Caucus on Twitter. And subscribe to their podcasts on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. Attention all you gamers out there, The Game In is a Quakertown-based, black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show, and they've got everything for retro N64s and latest consoles, video games for all platforms, collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, walls, literally walls of Funko Pops, I kid you not. And look, with school starting up, you got to know they're probably going to keep this going. Kids get discounts with A's on the report cards. Check them out on their Facebook page. Follow them on Twitter at TheGameIn. That's with 2 N's. You got a question about a game, look for something hard to get, drop in an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. Special shout out, as usual, goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at @SongADayman, again with 2 N's, @SongADayman on Twitter. And folks, don't let Paul Martino and his oligarch friends buy our schools and push extremist politics in our community. Raging Chicken has teamed up with Levelfield to launch a truly community-rooted PAC to invest in organizing, support local and statewide progressive candidates, and unmask the toxic organizations injecting our communities with right-wing extremism. We're putting small-dollar donations to work to beat back the power of big money. You can get more information, and you can drop us a donation at ragingchicken.levelfield.net. Well, I'm totally excited tonight. On tonight's show, of course, I welcome Mark Pinsley to the show. Mark is a Democratic candidate for PA State Senate in the 16th District. The 16th District now is newly drawn to include portions of northern Bucks County, upper Bucks County, and Lehigh County, western Lehigh. Mark is currently Lehigh County Controller and is seeking to add Democratic pickups for the state Senate. Following Republican Pat Browne's loss to right-wing challenger in the Republican primary, this guy got by the name of Jarrett Coleman, there's even more at stake. Coleman is an anti-abortion candidate that served the Parkland School Board to push anti-masking policies during the pandemic and who stoked the flames of critical race theory conspiracies. Mark brings an experienced, progressive voice to this election with so much at stake. With enough people on the ground organizing by his side, Pinsley has got a good shot of turning the PA16 Blue. Yep, we'll talk to Mark about his campaign and the stakes of this November's election. Welcome to the show, Mark.
Hey, Kevin, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Oh, man,
it's
absolutely.
good to see you when I'm not sweating.
Yeah, right. Well, I was going to say, it was great seeing you yesterday. We had a great rally for reproductive rights in Sellersville. Mark was one of the featured speakers, along with Ashley Ehas, Gwendolyn Stoltz, Jim Miller. They're out there with candidates, amazing youth activists, kind of standing together as a community in the sweltering heat. But, look, kind of equality, justice in our future doesn't stop when the weather gets hot, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So everybody, I want everybody to be aware of this tonight, just so you know. We got a little bit of a late start on part. We're having some weird kind of tech issues on the background, so we're getting a little delay on our end. It shouldn't affect what you're hearing, but if you hear little pauses in between kind of us responding, that's just because we're dealing with that little thing. Just want to heads up to everyone. It's not that we're kind of wanting big gaps there. It's just every once in a while we're getting this little gap just for everyone's information. Chuck jumps in and says, yes, it was freaking hot yesterday. Yes, it was, Chuck. How you doing, Chuck? How you doing, Emily? Thanks for joining the show tonight. So, Mark, now, before we jump into your campaign, and there's a whole bunch of stuff I want to talk about. I want to talk about what you're doing with banking up there in Lehigh County. I want to talk about the stakes of the election. But before we get there and kind of jump right into it, maybe we could just kind of pause a little bit for those folks who maybe haven't had a chance to come out and hear you speak, haven't kind of are kind of becoming new because this is a newly drawn district. So folks in Upper Bucks might be a little bit less familiar with your background. However, folks in Lehigh County a little bit more familiar. So let's just step back a little bit and give us a baseline here. Talk us a little bit about kind of your background and the kind of what brings you to this run for PA State Senate.
Yeah, I'll start with the background, then get to PA Senate 16.
Excellent.
So basically, I've been a business guy all my life, actually. So I, came out of college. I went to Northeastern University up in Boston, and I had worked with my grandfather for some time. So I was doing school at night, working for my grandfather, who sold chairs to hotels and restaurants. And of course I was a young man, and I was like, well, I'm never going to make $1 million doing this. I got to go start doing something else, because we always want to do better, right? Like the grass is always greener.
Right.
And I started my own little company, which was, at the time, you would call it an e-commerce company today. We raised like $1 million. We started this little company. I ended up selling it. I didn't become a millionaire, but it was a good trip. And then I ended up, working for a really large company, which was called ILS, and it was a part of a company called Aviall, which is a public company now owned by Boeing. And I was the vice president of marketing. And basically what I did was I got to travel the world, so I was a young man. I was 29. I started there at 29 as vice president of marketing. And really, what a phenomenal time. The internet had just sort of become a big thing. We were using it in order to deliver services. We were kind of like the eBay of the aviation industry. So if you were a airline and you needed a black box today, you would use our system, and we would tell you where that black box was, and then you would negotiate for that black box offline. And it was just it was just a phenomenal time. Like what a life I got a chance to live. Mm-hmm. I lived down in Memphis when we did that, and we had our first child, who was my daughter. And eventually, what ended up happening is she turned 3 or something like that, and she said, "Y'all," and my wife said, "We're moving." So we made our way back.
That, right?
Yeah, exactly. So we made our way back here, so I live in near Allentown now. And we actually chose the spot mostly because it was between my mother and my father. We had a young child, and I had actually, at the time, I bought another company, which is up in Buffalo, New York, and I traveled kind of back and forth. And it was an IT company as well, so that's really my background is in IT. I eventually sold that, and I went to go work for a very large company called DSM, which is the largest producer of vitamin ingredients in the world. So if you had milk today and it was fortified with vitamin D, it's very likely that vitamin D came from DSM. So it's a company you don't hear about. And my role was to be the global product manager for personalized nutrition. So my role was to go make people healthier. And it was just, what a great role, right? Like you're going around, you're helping people be healthier. We did it primarily through nutrition. So you can kind of think of it like Weight Watchers, except it wasn't necessarily about your weight, right? It was about any health issue. If you were a runner, we would help you be faster. If you were on the verge of diabetes, we would help you not be on the verge of diabetes. So that was really good. And eventually DSM decided to kind of spin us off. And when they decided to spin us off, I just decided I didn't want to go with the new company. And I bought a small little company, which is in the skincare industry, called Dermamid Solutions. And I've owned that company now for 12 years. And we sell to spas and dermatologists primarily, both medical devices like microdermabrasion and then also actual skincare that you put on your skin. Then 2016 happened.
Well, this is going to be exactly my question. Okay, here you got a guy, he's traveled around the world, he's gone through all these different businesses, kind of has lived a life, and now he's in politics, right? So what happens, right? So there you go, 2016.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. Yeah, no, so the 2016 happens, and Trump wins. And I'm Jewish, and so when he was talking about the Mexicans and the Muslims and whatever else, I literally couldn't take it. Of course, being Jewish, this is one of your learnings, right, is about Nazism and things like that. And I'm not saying that he was a Nazi, right? That's not my point. My point was the way he talked about people, I just didn't like. And it just led to nowhere. And so I became an activist right then and there. Like that night, I started doing everything I could to kind of balance out the world. Or at least balance out the world for me. And I was hoping that, if it was balanced for me, that it would be balanced for other people as well. And so originally I started by talking to the chair of the party, who at the time was a guy named Marcel Groen. And, people love him or hate him. But for me, he was a good mentor. He really taught me a lot. And I didn't know anything about politics, right? So I was coming in, brand new. And he's still my mentor. I really respect him. And some of the guidance that he has given, most of the guidance that he's given me. And so one of the things he had me do right away was he's like, why don't you go run for something small? Because he knew how angry I was, and I was like, I want to run for Congress, man. I'm just going to go. And he's like, Mark, hold your horses, buddy. He's like, go run for your township. And so I did. I ran for my township. And I struggled to do that, right? Because my anger was at Trump. It wasn't at my local township. But, he was right, because, what I ended up doing is I'm knocking on doors. Right? It's the first time I was ever knocking on doors, for me. I had done it a couple times for candidates, but it's very different. And so I learned a lot about the process. And I will say, we ran a great campaign. And I'll also say it had nothing to do with me. I had a guy who was my campaign manager. And every day he would give me a list of to-dos, and I would just do whatever he told me. Go knock on a door, I'll go knock on a door. Go make a phone call, I'll make a phone call. I just trusted whatever he said, so he ran a really good campaign. And what ended up happening was the party noticed, because I was the first Democrat to win in over 20 years in South Whitehall.
I remember
and so the party came to me and asked me to run for the 16th at that time, which was against Pat Browne. And, to be honest, once again, I was kind of like, man, don't I want to run for Congress? I'm still mad at Trump. Is this really the right path for me? And, I called Marcel Groen and I told him the situation. He's like, Mark, you have to decide, why are you in this? Are you in this just for you? Or are you in this for the party? Are you in this for the people? Who are you in this for? And I'm like, look, at the end of the day, I'm in this for the people. And right now, I believe that the people need more Democrats. That's who I am. And that's what I think that they need. And they certainly do not need, Trump. Forgetting about the Republicans, just Trumpism. And so he's like, well, look, if you run against this guy, Pat Browne, and let's say you lose, but you get him to spend money, you're helping somebody else. You're helping some other candidate. If you run for Congress, there's going to be 7 or 11 of you Democrats running against each other. Is that what you want? Because if you want to go be that, I'll support you. But if you want to if you're here to help, this is how you can help. And so that made a lot of sense to me, quite honestly. And so I decided to run against Pat Browne, but I planned on beating him, right? I wasn't just doing it to, let me see, how I do or get him to spend money. No, I was there to win. But part of winning was also accepting the fact that even if I lost, if I could get him to spend enough money, maybe somebody else could win.
Well, and this is also a really important point too, as well, because Pat Browne, of course, he was entrenched. He was one of the one of the power brokers in the state Senate, right? At the time, he had, long established himself, a very, familiar to what Brian Fitzpatrick does down this way, as kind of, oh, I'm kind of a moderate, I'm kind of just like work on all sides. But really, when it comes right down to it, you watch the guy's votes, and the guy is voting with the, kind of with the right on this. But nonetheless, someone who's tough to beat. But you can't ever even scratch the surface of someone like him until you get someone who's going to run. Right. And run a strong campaign, not just for, kind of their own sense of self-fulfillment, but also to really give the guy a run for the money and force him to actually campaign and put the issues out on the table. So.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly right. And I'll tell you, once again, I ended up having a really good campaign manager. Her name was Hillary Kleins. And, she helped me sort of take no prisoners.
Yep.
Right. Like, really a lot of Democrats were against us. There were a bunch of Democrats that were like, you can't fight, Pat Browne. He's loved by everybody. And he was like legitimately, I don't know if loved is the right word, but he gave money to, let's say he gave money to a museum, just as an example. This is just an example, not necessarily the example.
Right.
Well, he then goes to the board members and he's like, hey, I just got you guys, $300,000. Maybe you guys want to contribute to my PAC. Which, of course, they then feel obligated to do, right? Like, he just got the money. And he's also basically, letting you know, by the way, don't vote for anyone else because I won't get you any money in the future.
Right.
Right. And so a lot of people were afraid to help me or even donate to me. None of the unions would donate to me. Planned Parenthood wouldn't, of all things, like Planned Parenthood wouldn't even endorse me. The school board wouldn't endorse me because he had a lot of power.
Yep.
And so that's one of the good things about the good/bad things about, what's happened now is like he lost, which was a surprise to many people.
Well, and it was a close race. I mean, it came down to the wire that he lost that race. There's two things that are going on right now, which I think are remarkable for this district. Like, number one is the fact that Pat Browne lost, right? Because I think that for the longest time, everyone in the Republican Party, if you talk to people in the kind of like the statewide Republican Party, they thought Browne was a shoo-in, right? They thought that kind of, okay, Browne's going to be in. We don't even need to pay attention to that race. Then also, you're talking about the redistricting that took place that kind of brought in kind of upper bucks into the equation. So that actually kind of starts to kind of take away from some of his kind of traditional support for the people that he had glad-handed for a long time. And I'll add in this too as well. Jarrett Coleman, who's now going to be your opponent, right? The kind of ran to Pat Browne's right. That guy, what he's done with the Parkland School Board echoes exactly what's been happening in Upper Bucks and the school boards. Right. So it's like you see this conglomeration of, that guy is, the Lehigh County or the Parkland School District version of what happened in Central Bucks, what's happening here in Penridge, what's happening at kind of North Penn down in Montgomery County. And that is a setup for a couple things. One, it takes Pat Browne's legacy and his kind of power brokering off the table. Right.
Yep.
But also it makes the stakes that much higher and that much clearer in a contestation like this. And I also think all those endorsements that you just talked about that you didn't get in the past time, they're sure as hell lining up behind you now.
They are. There's no doubt. Yeah, that's true. It's interesting too because his school, him being on school board, you do get to see what kind of guy he is, right? And how he acts and reacts to these things. The negative is, sort of as you said, it's a big district. The 16th is geographically a large district. And so making sure that people know who he is very difficult, right? Like, he is going to have a lot of money. He is funded by a guy named Jeffrey Yass, who is the richest person in Pennsylvania, a huge charter schools person. So, Jarrett, of course, is going to be for charter schools. I mean, I think of Jarrett as a puppet to Yass, really. I mean, Jarrett came out of nowhere. He's doing Yass's bidding. So, I mean, look, he also, Jarrett also supports Mastriano, obviously, right?
Yep.
And Mastriano, look, he just supported Gab. I just told you I was Jewish. Look, one of the worst anti-Semitic sites that there is, Mastriano is on. Mastriano, though, while he won't say he's a Christian nationalist, he's a Christian nationalist, right? I mean,
Yes.
Marjorie Taylor Greene's willing to admit it. He isn't willing to admit it maybe until he wins. And frankly, I think that we should call, Christian nationalism what it really is, which is like the KKK, right? Like people understand that Christian nationalism sounds too nice, really.
Yeah, I agree. But it's nonetheless that this is exactly the same thread that runs through the kind of the worst threads of kind of white supremacy and racist politics in our country's history. And you can dress it up however you want to do it. You can call it whatever you're going to do. You can try to kind of say that it's not what it used to be, but when it comes right down to it, that's what we see. There's a reason why Mastriano is showing up at these kind of far right kind of Christian nationalist kind of rallies. There's a reason why he goes into Gab and kind of spends $5,000 as campaign advice to the owner of Gab,
right,
so that every new follower in Gab automatically follows Mastriano's account. Things like that. Right. And, when you also mentioned Jeffrey Yass, I actually had a question about this from one of our kind of frequent listeners, Starry-Eyed. She basically said, hey, ask him about the Yass money, right? Because that's exactly you said Jeffrey Yass, who PA Spotlight, who's done a bang-up job of exposing and following Jeffrey Yass's money and the way that it's influenced both school districts and what's happening in charter schools and the attacks on public education. To see that money flood into the Parkland School District and throughout kind of the state has got to be called out. And the minute that Jeffrey Yass becomes associated with someone like this, obviously it's got to be all hands on deck, because that's a lot of money. Those are deep pockets, and those are, the seeds of extremism being watered right there.
Absolutely. At the end of the day, so I've thought about this a lot, like, because look, growing up, I've experienced anti-Semitism, right? Like, okay, it's a part of life in the United States. But it has, for me, in my lifetime, it has never been terrible. I mean, at least in the areas that I have lived in. And I lived down in Memphis and places like that, sort of the Bible Belt. And, in the Bible Belt, like one of the first questions they ask you is like, what church do you go to? Just like a standard question. Hey, how are you? What church do you go to? Something we would never do up here. And, so I would tell them, and they were fine. Like, basic. I mean, they may have said stuff behind my back, but, to me, they were fine with it. So they're good enough. But now I look at all this stuff and I'm like, where is all this? Not just anti-Semitism, but, anti-Islam, any minority group. Like it's gaining steam. And so is it just that the people all of a sudden woke up and they're like, hey, we really are terrible people, and we just were in the box for all this long, Or I think more likely, this is sort of the portion of capitalism that has gone wrong. Like we've become sort of an oligarchy, and the Jeffrey Yasses of the world, the rich people of the world, they're really creating this battle. So like think about CRT I think is a great example. So what is CRT really? Like when you ask, even if you ask sort of an average Republican who's upset about it, be like, okay, what is CRT? A lot of times they can't explain it. I'm like, okay, well, show it to me in one of the books. Just show it to me.
It's like, making white boys cry for feeling bad for themselves. That's what CRT is. I mean, right. that's usually what you get. You get some version of that, right? And it has that's it.
That's it, exactly. But what it really is, to be fair, it's parents caring about what their kids are taught.
Yep.
And they've been misled into thinking that their kids are taught this. Because like, look, if you were told something, that your kid was being taught something, and you went to the school, or you would go to the school if you were worried about it, and you would probably initially anyway have a reasonable conversation. Hey, I'd like to understand a little bit about this, blah, 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 right? But they're already coming, they have been so high strung about this by the news, by everything. They're not coming in and having a conversation and trying to understand it. Like they're coming in and saying, we got to burn it down.
Yep.
But they don't. But I actually do think that what they're feeling inside is a reasonable thing, which is I care about my kid, and I want to make sure he or she is being taught the right things. And I don't know if it's so much like that they feel like, that their kids are being taught. I think that their fear is that their kids are being taught not to love America. I think when it comes down to everything else, and it's not true, but I think that that's what they feel, or that's what they're being told is, look, your kid's being taught not to love America because there was slavery, because we interred the Japanese, because we did whatever. It's not true, but it's their feeling. And so who created that distance? The oligarchs, right? It's the Jeffrey Yasses
100%.
who are like, let's pit these guys against each other.
Yep.
And so that's what I think the problem is.
Well, I mean, I think 100%. I mean, this is what we saw. It happens again and again in school boards. I think what's been fascinating to me is I've been reliving this moment from 2010 when the Tea Party first kind of blew up, right? After the midterm elections, and the Tea Party blew up. And I remember that there was in Kutztown, where I teach at Kutztown University, in the town there was I had a couple students who showed up at one of my classes, and they're talking with head of class. They're like, "Yeah, have you heard about this? There's a Tea Party, there's this meeting. It's like people that want to stand up against the kind of elites that actually do something." They were generally curious and looking for getting involved with something to do. They weren't ideologues of any stripe, right? They just were looking to do something, and they started going to these meetings and started going. And then after about a month and a half of going to these meetings, they started being like, where is this coming from? And suddenly like pre-printed materials would start showing up, and then all these talking points, and they'd have these outside speakers that would be coming in, and they started getting really freaked out. And they said, this one woman had come in and basically said, it started to feel like a cult. And I'm like, exactly. And this is exactly what we see happening here, except now you've talked about a more advanced media infrastructure that has penetrated down to the local level, especially exacerbated through social media and these kind of niches, that's being fed by these oligarchs, exactly what you said. And that, Paul Martino, who invested all tens of thousands of dollars in school boards across the state of Pennsylvania, came in and basically said things like, well, now that I've built my apparatus, now I get to see what I can make them do. And he basically said that to the New York Times. And
Absolutely.
So, I mean, this is exactly it. And I think that, and it's very, very hard. I mean, I like what you're saying there. To bring us back a little bit and say, look, a lot of the parents that start off on this pathway, right, about asking questions about stuff are there because they're just concerned about their kids. It's only then how that gets channeled and how that gets brought in where it can really be extraordinarily divisive, certainly.
Yeah, I saw like a little video of this woman. I can't remember what state she was in. She's like, well, for both sides, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create an ordinance that says we can't do anything, or we shouldn't teach about racism. What? And like in her mind, she thought that she was doing something for both sides. And like, so she was missing the point, right? Like,
right.
And I just feel like a lot of them we're misunderstanding each other. I think that, and I think that we're misunderstanding each other to some extent on purpose. I think that we're misunderstanding each other because we listen to different news outlets, right? And we're being programmed to hear in a specific way. Because I think, I've talked to some of these people that really believe in CRT, and the more I talk to them, the more, you poke holes, the more they're actually willing to listen. Like they're like, yeah, I just care about my kid. That's all I care about. I care about my kid, and I don't want them to hate America. And frankly, like when I grew up, right, like a lot of this was whitewashed, right? Like when I grew up, Christopher Columbus was like the man, right? And so, and I think, well, that like when I look at that in hindsight, I think, well, that was terrible. Why would they teach us that? And some of these other guys, the CRT guys, might not be thinking that way. They might be thinking, hey, it was fine. I accepted Christopher Columbus for whatever, for who he was in that moment. And I don't want to go back to that.
Right.
Like I want to make sure we're taught about the Holocaust. I want to make sure that we're taught about slavery. I want to make sure we're taught about the Japanese internment. On the left, we think a lot of, FDR, obviously. Mm-hmm. Great New Deal, all that kind of stuff. But, he did send a bunch of Jews back on a boat. He did inter the Japanese. And
he did cut the deal when he made the New Deal. He did cut the deal that left farm workers out of that New Deal and left a big chunk of African Americans out of that deal. Right?
Absolutely.
And that's just the facts, right? So we could be uncomfortable with that, and then our heroes could be tarnished. But you know what? That's what history really is all about. That we look at these things in their complexity, not just as kind of like some sort of idealized version of whatever hero we want to worship in the moment.
Right, and it's okay. Right,
yes.
And it's okay. Like they're human. I'm okay because I'm human too. I'm okay with that.
So so we've got this going on. I mean, I could talk about this all night. So I really want to give some space to talk more about kind of we're doing your campaign, and maybe one way of kind of getting in this is I'd like to kind of point out something that you mentioned at the rally yesterday. That I had just started reading up on what you'd been doing there. And that comes in your job in Lehigh Valley Controller and what you're doing in banking. And I think I don't want to put words in your mouth yet, but you kind of led up and say, well, look, I sat there and I said, well, what can I actually do? What can I actually do right now that I don't have to wait till the election, right? To just wait and vote harder in the fall, right? What can you do now? Can you talk a little about where that led you and what you did and the concrete results of what's happening here?
Yeah, I'm excited to tell you about this.
This is great.
So I'm going to give you a little bit of background because I think it just makes the story, more fun, I guess. So, it really started the week of July 4th. And that week we were going on vacation. My family and I were going on vacation. And my daughter, who's 20, and my wife, who's older, obviously, was like, do not talk about politics. Whatever you do, I don't want to hear about politics. We don't want to hear about it. Okay. They do not like politics. So I agreed. It wasn't easy. You have to stay away from the news in order to not talk about politics. You can be triggered. But on July 4th, I was like holding up a flag. My son was taking a picture of me, and my daughter lost it on me. She was like, how can you be celebrating freedoms when we're losing all of our freedoms? And she's like, of all the days that you should be out protesting, today's the day. I was like, damn.
What happened to the no politics rule?
I know, exactly. So I took it
great point.
serious. I was a little embarrassed.
Great point.
Yeah. I was a little embarrassed, that I hadn't thought about it from her perspective, and it was a good embarrassed. not in a bad way. And so I was trying to think, so I'm the controller of Lehigh County. What can I do? And strangely enough, and this is a part of the story that sometimes I lift off, I was watching TikTok of all things, I'm browsing through things, and this one TikTok came up, and it was this woman who was basically trying to change her life to only use products where the company wasn't investing in a candidate that was anti-abortion. Mm-hmm. And so that kind of impacted me, what she was saying. So I was like, oh, you know what? I know that Wells Fargo is our bank. And we have $145 million. I'm talking about Lehigh County now, has $145 million in the Wells Fargo bank. And so I started doing some research on the bank, so how are they? And look, they do invest in both sides. They invest in Republicans and they invest in Democrats. But I only care about the Republicans at the moment, right? So I saw they invested $20,000 in Greg Abbott, probably the worst in terms of abortion right now, right? They invested in others as well, all sort of anti-abortionists, anti-gun safety, climate deniers, all that kind of good stuff. And from my perspective, I am happy if we can get big money out of politics. I don't care if Democrats can't get money from banks, right? Goodbye.
Right. See ya.
So what I did was I went back to the board of Lehigh County, and I said, I'd really like to divest $145 million, so all of our money out of Wells Fargo, and then move it to a local non-political bank. So that's a bank that does not invest in any candidates. And so, the board, some reluctantly, some not so reluctantly, they were very aggressive about it, agreed. And so we're now in the process of at least understanding what it takes to divest ourselves. So we've had the same bank literally for 40 years. And so there's stuff we don't know, who actually has is it the executive that can make the decision? Is it the board that has to make the decision? So we're going through a legal review right now of literally how do we do it? And then my intention is to find a local bank that meets all of the needs that we have, especially and things that Wells Fargo gives us already, good interest rates, all that kind of stuff, and then move our money. And, not only do I want us to move our money, but this is something that I feel strongly about, which is other people can do this as well, right? So wherever you live, whatever township you're in, they probably have a bank that they're using. The municipality that you're in is using a bank. Right, we'll find out what bank it is, and are those banks? And if it's Wells Fargo or some national bank, it's very likely they're donating to candidates. And so if they are, ask your board to remove it. Go to a local bank. That's not an issue. This is not a major. It will take time, but it's not a major thing, right? If you're going, let's say another good one is your school board, right? They're having a huge problem down, as you mentioned, in Penridge. Yep. Well, instead of having this conversation about CRT, ask them about their bank, right? Schools have a lot of money in the bank. I'm sure that they are, depending on the school, they can easily be 145 million as well. And so you take that out of a bank and you put it into you take it out of a national bank, you put it into a local bank, and all of a sudden you're having an impact, right? Because now instead of those dollars being used to invest in some candidate somewhere, they're literally being reinvested into your community because you're using a local bank, and that's what they do.
100%. And you think about it, and who's the people who are going to be working at the local bank? People who live in your community, right? So, and you're
exactly.
especially in an era where we're seeing these kind of, massive kind of, mergers and kind of takeovers where local banks have it, are local or regional banks, whatever it might be, non-political banks, you just said, have a tough time of it. So whatever it means, taking those resources and shifting it and kind of putting it in and reinvesting in the community, it's like a win-win in so many different ways.
Absolutely.
I'm reminded of some conversations that they have, I'm thinking back to what, say, for example, Students Against Sweatshops did when they wanted to divest kind of their school's affiliation with clothing manufacturers who use sweatshop labor. And they said, well, what's our mechanism to have the impact? Well, let's look at our licensing agreements, right? Our licensing agreements, right, we can have, when next time an agreement is up, we can lobby to have that contract say you have to prove and have an objective third-party independent monitor of your kind of your production facilities to make sure that they're not in sweatshops. So we're going to set that up, and it's like you're exploding your impact because you're basically saying, okay, this little linchpin right here, we have control of this in our space that we can have a disproportionate impact for doing good, right? And having this. And this is exactly what you're reminded of. As soon as you said that, I'm like thinking about all these different initiatives that different communities have done around divestment and reinvestment in other aspects of the community. So great stuff.
And one of the things about a bank too, is just like if you take $145 million a bank, it doesn't really matter how much you take out, but you take $145 million out of a bank, they now can't invest or reloan $145 million to someone else. So you are literally hurting their bottom line, not just taking money out of a bank. They cannot make money off of your money, and that's a big deal. It's a big deal. And so when you go to your school board and you ask them to reinvest it, if they're saying no, be like, well, why? We're going to a nonpartisan bank. So you're telling me that you're partisan because you want to stay with Wells Fargo or you want to stay with TD Bank or whatever the bank is, PNC. No. Like, let's take this and get big money out of politics. And you know what? Most Republicans want big money out of politics as well. It's only the rich that want big money in politics.
Right. 100%. No, and it's a great way. And it's a great sell too as well, because you're saying, look, no, the goal is not to shift it from people who give to Republicans and people give to Democrats. We're shifted to somebody who's supporting our community and is non-political, right? Who's not dishing this money, is actually spending their money on their, the people that have money in their bank, right? Maybe in customer service, maybe in better interest rates for, for their customers, maybe for their employees to ensure that they got good health coverage and benefits, as opposed to finding out how we can manipulate the political process. So I think that was such a freaking amazing thing. And it's going to be great to see where this goes from here. The other thing I want to, I don't want to dig, only on the issues on the kind of around the finances, but you had some major kind of wins just looking at through the lens of the controller what was happening in terms of medical costs, right? In Lehigh County, if I'm not mistaken. Talk about
this is really exciting too. So first off, I'm a believer in, single payer healthcare, right? Medicare for all, love the idea. It's because I own a business, right? And every year, and so prior to COVID, we paid 100% for everyone. And every year it was going up 15 to 20%. My costs were. And so it just wasn't sustainable. It was becoming sort of a heartache. And so I care. And the other thing is that I want my employees to be able to walk away and still have healthcare. Like, I don't want them trapped in my business because they're like, oh, I can't walk across the street and get healthcare, or I can't just start my own business and have healthcare. I want them to just have healthcare, and I want them to have better healthcare than I provide, to be honest. Like, we provide healthcare, but totally. It's like, high deductible, all that kind of stuff. So when I got into Lehigh County, like, it was on my mind anyway, right? Like, I'm like, oh, what can we do about the healthcare? And they're buying. So Lehigh County is self-insured. So basically what that means is, like, if you go to the doctor and you pay the copay and there's an $80, $80 left that have to be paid, Lehigh County actually pays that on behalf of its employees. It's not an insurance company that pays it. We pay it. Mm-hmm. And so, but we do have like an insurance company that's over us that manages the network. Right. So what doctors you can go to, what pharmacies you can go to, things like that. So I thought, hey, this would be great to really audit. Let me dig into this. and it's exciting. And so what I did was, so we spend about $30 million on employee health care a year. About $7 million of that is the pharmacy. So you go to your pharmacist, you pay the copay, we pay the rest. And I was like, okay, well, let me just take a look at the pharmacy and see how we're doing. And what I found was $1.4 million in waste, just pure waste. Meaning, like, one of the things that I did was I ran all of the drugs that, our employees have purchased, and I ran it against a tool called GoodRx. And GoodRx is a website where, if you don't have insurance, you can just go buy, cheaper, cheap drugs, a little less expensive with a coupon. So I'm like, okay, if my employees had just gotten a coupon, how would they do? And they would, I can't remember exactly what the number was. It was significant. Like, we would have done better if our employees had just gone out, used GoodRx, and we paid them back than having used, our own insurance. So our insurance provider, who negotiates the price, was basically skimming off the top. In my view, skimming off the top, right? In their view, just making money.
Off other people's illnesses. Great. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And so what we ended up doing after we found the 1.4 million is we went out to bid again to rebid that portion of the healthcare, and we ended up saving $3 million. So at a $7 million spend, we saved $3 million.
That's crazy.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And so that's when people are telling me, well, we can't go to single payer healthcare. The money's not there. I'm like, oh, the money's there. Let me tell you.
Well, I'm so glad to hear your story around this too as well, because one of the things that's always baffled me is that, this argument that single payer businesses are against that. And, the people that I know, obviously I'm not hanging around with Fortune 500 CEOs, right? But people that I know who run businesses, it would be such a incredible relief to them to say, if you had single payer and then that is taken off your books, right, entirely, then your employees are healthy. Like you said, your employees are going to be there because they want to be there, not because they feel they have to be there because they have to keep their benefits, right? And your bottom line doesn't get constantly impacted, right, by these rising drug costs. Drug costs or medical costs every single year. It seemed to always be like a no-brainer. To hear you talk about that as a business owner and be like, I'm for it. Let's do it, because it just makes a whole lot of sense.
And I can kind of explain it too from both sides, because having been an executive at a large company, I know the issue there. And the issue is it's really not so much that they don't want single payer healthcare, is that they don't want risk. So they don't know what's going to happen if we change from the healthcare that we're on today to some future healthcare, and that uncertainty is unpalatable to a very large company. Like, oh my God, I'm only spending $30 million today. Maybe I'm going to be spending $60 million tomorrow. I just don't know. That's the problem. And then on the other side, you have, like, let's say restaurants, right, who typically are paying hourly, and aren't providing any health insurance whatsoever. So now all of a sudden, let's just assume it's 10%, like 10% of their wages, have to go towards healthcare. So they're worried as well, because they're like, well, all of a sudden I'm going to have this big bill. It's true, but the fact of the matter is every single restaurant will have it, so it won't be limited to you. So if you have to increase your price by a nickel, so be it, right? Like, you're going to see the market's going to adjust. And I just think people are scared, but when you know the numbers, when you actually know the numbers, it's doable. This is a very doable thing. And we could do it just here in Pennsylvania, by the way. If we can't get this done, at the national level, in Pennsylvania, we could get it done.
So obviously that's going to be dependent on having people like you in the PA State Senate. Obviously candidates like that were kind of at the rally for reproductive justice yesterday for Gwen Stoltz, to make sure Jim Miller, that have it in the PA House. So talk a little bit about, I don't know, like, what else you want to kind of put in here, but I want people to get a sense of other things, that why you think it matters and what's at stake here. Because I think that we have a real opportunity here, I think, in the state politics. And frankly, I'm really glad that you decided not to run for, Congress, but decided to run in the state, because frankly, I think this is where the fight is right now.
That's
and
true.
We need people that are going to be, and especially there's absolute insanity happening in our state house, right? I know enough people that are working out there, and where the Republicans out there want to take us is down a very, very dark road. So to have good candidates in there that have the experiences that you do, that have the background is. So can you talk a little bit about, again, why do you think it's kind of critical to have folks like you than the PA State Senate? And what about your campaign do you think that you bring to the table that you think is, is necessary at this moment?
Yeah, wow, there's some good questions in there. So one of the things that I think is necessary at this moment, honestly, is not having a career politician. Right. And so and I don't mean anything negative about career politicians. I really don't. I think they're necessary as well. But, if you're not a career politician, what it allows you to do is take a lot more risk because you're not worried about whether you're going to get reelected or not. You're worried about doing the right thing first and foremost, and then reelection after that. And so I think that, going for candidates like that, where you see they have a drive and that they're, this is not going to be, a forever job for them, that they really are here to try and do something good. And hopefully it's good for the many, not the few. So I think that that's an important thing. For me personally, obviously, I think I have, I do have sort of wide eyes and types of things we can get done, but I also understand the numbers, being obviously a financial guy. And I do think there's a lot of money that we can save. So for the most part, look, I actually think for the most part, most governments are actually run financially reasonably. And in fact, coming from a corporate setting, a corporate setting has a lot more waste than any government does, because they're just willing to accept the waste, right, and move forward because their goal is profitability, whatever. In the government, because it's our money, we're much stricter, and it takes, a lot more to, to change things. That said, if you take the example that I just gave you with the $3 million at the county level, and you move that to a state level, you're talking about like $140 million, $150 million worth of savings that can happen. I don't think anybody's going to get their tax money back, but I certainly think that we could use that more effectively than giving it to the pharmaceutical company, or specifically the PBM, the pharmacy benefit managers.
Yes.
So I think that somebody who has an eye on the fiscal side has a chance potentially to do better with the Republicans, right? Because I can talk and feel, about the financial component very similar to the way that they do. It's just that I have different motivations on the social side, right? Like the things that we should get done, the schools, how we should be funding schools, things of that nature.
Well, I also think that, having somebody with that kind of fiscal experience and kind of outlook too as well is in a better position to call some of these folks out. And I don't necessarily mean that you're going to go there and say, you're just a liar, not like that. But look, a lot of what happens in Harrisburg when it comes to, these kind of budget hearings, when it comes to fiscal matters, a lot of times those are just talking points. That once you scratch the surface of what the claims that they're making about waste, the claims that they're making about spending, they just don't hold up under even the kind of, limited scrutiny. So to have somebody that's there to say, hey, you know what? And I've interacted with you enough now to know that you're not the kind of guy who's you're an asshole. So you're gonna be like, well, okay, but if we look at it this way, right, we can actually see there's a lot of savings here, and that savings here kind of solves the problem and takes this issue kind of off the table, so we can focus on getting things in this bill done, for example. Absolutely. Yeah, exactly. I think that those are the kind of things that are important, and I think that those are some of these issues I think cross boundaries and are things that we could get done together. I believe, maybe I'm wrong, but there are other things that I think that you need to make noise about, right? And so, for example, just like in the federal government, our state government has shrunk the size of our version of OSHA. We've shrunk the size of our version of, the IRS, the Revenue Department, right? And why are we doing that? We're doing that so that the IRS is not going or in our case, the Revenue Department is not going after the big guys to go after their money and all that kind of stuff. So they're underfunded in a specific manner for a specific reason that was done on purpose. And these are the kind of things where I'll get up there and I'll be talking about that all day long. The easiest way not to have OSHA is just to get rid of the enforcement mechanism. Right. Yep. And yet and so one of my big issues, quite honestly, is so I do a lot on crime as the controller.
It's one of the biggest expenses that we have. So 69 cents on every dollar of Lehigh County is spent towards law and order. So that includes, the jail and the PD, the public defender and the DA. But there's lots of like money in that area that we can get if we went after white collar crime.
Jeez,
So,
yeah.
right, if you stole $1,000 from your your employer, do you know where you'd be?
Yeah, you'd be in jail.
In jail, right? Exactly.
But if you do it through wage theft, right?
Right, exactly. But if they steal $1,000 from you, what happens?
Nothing.
Nothing. And that's not right. That's not right. And we need to fix that because there's 700,000 Pennsylvanians every year that lose some portion of their wages because they're stolen from them. And so this could be a contractor who did a work for you last week and he comes to get paid and they're like, nah. Or it could be a cashier who, is told to clock out early, or whatever, isn't paid the overtime. There's lots of reasons. And there is, as I said, 700,000 employees in Pennsylvania that get screwed every year.
Every year.
Every year.
I use it. This is something that Rick Smith and his show, Rick Smith Show, is big. He's been focusing on this for years, right? And talking about wage theft as, again, both at the state level and at the national level. And it's really, we need, one, it's great to hear you call it what it is, right? This is money that's being stolen from employees and from workers, right? This is
Absolutely.
not something that they should have been paid more, or the wages should have been, no, this is actually systematic theft, right? By the employer from the employee, from the kind of the working class in Pennsylvania. And the fact that that is happening, 700,000 per year are getting robbed systematically and nothing is done about it is disgusting.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And that's why, so if do you want your police to go run after the guy who smoked marijuana, or do you want your police to go work on the guy that they're actually going to make money off of? Because then when they charge you as an employer, you're going to end up paying money into Pennsylvania.
Yes. 100%. So we've got this. So let me ask you this, because I know we got to wrap up soon, and I've taken you longer than I promised I would.
No, this is great. I love it.
Okay, awesome. So for me, I look at this election as incredibly, incredibly high stakes. The reason why, again, that, I've been at 2 rallies now that you've shown up that have been kind of there around kind of reproductive justice and kind of defending abortion rights. I know questions. Look, we're staring down the face of global catastrophe when it comes to climate change. We're in a situation where we're watching kind of labor rights getting kind of ripped away from all of us, and the public being diminished. These are not small issues, right? These are significant issues that are going to require really kind of collective organizing, right? And really kind of not just you in the state Senate, but also all the people that are helping get you there, right?
Yep.
To keep up the pressure and keep up the organizing to get this stuff done. So when you're looking at it, you kind of backing up a little bit, looking at this again, the big picture, the stakes of what's going on here. It's a midterm election, right? A lot is going to depend on turnout. How would you talk about what is at stake when it comes to Pennsylvania and for the voters that are sitting there, where they're thinking about going to the polls this fall, right? And even more important, when they're thinking about what to do this weekend and should they go out and be knocking doors, should they go out and be kind of helping out or showing up? How would you talk about some of the stakes of this election?
Yeah, look, the stakes of I thought once Trump was out that, things might get back to normal. But they didn't. We are in a new normal. And frankly, we have already lost democracy as we knew it, right? So when you and I grew up, democracy was a certain way. I'm not saying democracy is over. I'm saying it's forever changed. So we now have a MAGA Supreme Court. And that MAGA Supreme Court has started with some very specific things, right? So reproductive rights were the biggest issue. But there was also Miranda rights are basically gone now. They sort of gutted them. They have made it easier for Border Patrol to walk into any house without a warrant if you're within 100 miles of the border. So there's some really serious things that they're doing, and they're coming up. The next legislative session, or excuse me, it's legislative. The next session for the Supreme Court, they're talking about legislative something theory, which escapes me at the moment. But the idea is that the legislator is completely in charge of your state. And when they're in charge of your state, you can't take anything to the courts. So if you're gerrymandered, sorry about your luck. If they want to change the outcome of the election, sorry about your luck. Right. And so this is a major year. At the very least, we need balance, of Republicans and Democrats. So that can't happen. In my mind, we need to obviously have more Democrats than Republicans. But, our lives with this new MAGA Supreme Court will not be the same. It will not be the same. And, the states are going to be, look, in the Constitution says we should be going towards a more perfect union. I think we're doing the exact opposite. I think we're headed towards a federation of states, rather than a union, where each state, like the governor now, is going to be hugely important. Not that they weren't previously, but now they really are important, right? Like they're the ones that are going to sign the final thing on whether abortion is there or not. Or whether there's prayer in school or not, right? And so when I'm talking about it, I'm trying to tell people, I'm trying to really tell people, because they're definitely worried about the abortion thing, which I think is the most important thing right now. But when you're looking down the line, you really need to understand that this Supreme Court is going to change the way democracy works. And we'll see if we have a democracy like ours in the future, or if it's like Hungary in the future, who just came from CPAC, right?
Yep. Viktor Orban just speaking at CPAC to like thunderous applause, right? I mean, seriously.
Yes, thunderous applause, exactly right. And I don't understand what they see. I just don't. I've been to Hungary and it's not great. So.
Yeah. By the way, just so folks, if you're curious about what Mark was talking about, legislative supremacy is the term you were talking about there, right?
Thank you.
Saying, or parliamentary supremacy is sometimes it's called this. And this is really big in conservative circles right now, which is going to play itself out in Arizona in a big time, especially if you've got all these kind of election deniers that were just won their primaries and that are now kind of on the ballot and look, they're going to take over this. And so, and right here in the state of Pennsylvania, Doug Mastriano says that one of the first things that he would do if he was elected governor, right, is number one, we don't elect our Secretary of State, it's appointed, right? So that he would appoint somebody who would, number one, invalidate everybody's voter registration, right, and force them to re-register. There's big questions about, that'll be a court fight, obviously, but would do that, right, and would start to kind of use the levers of the state as a way to suppress voting, right?
Absolutely.
And so we're right on the edge of that happening if Mastriano is elected to the governor, and or for that matter, if our the state legislature elects enough Republicans to override a veto. Either one of those scenarios.
Yep. Yeah, and that's why we need to flip the state, right? Like what people may not understand is like if you're upset with Pennsylvania, you should be angry at the Republicans. They've controlled for 30 years.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's not just the governor. They have had the Senate and the House for almost 30 years. So regardless of what you think of the governor, they have been in charge. And so if you don't like where Pennsylvania is going or has been, it's the Republicans' fault.
Where they go. And all the more reason we got to elect folks like Mark Pinsley here. So Mark, let me ask you as a way of kind of closing things out tonight. If people are interested, they want to find out more, right? They want to get involved with your campaign. They want to kind of donate to your campaign. Where can they go to get more information?
Yeah, so it's votemarkpinsley.com is my website. And look, we love when people, even donate stamps or, fill out postcards. Like I've got people filling out 100 postcards at a time. And, that's a real mailing. When I do a mailing, it costs money, right? Like sending out these mailers. And so even when you do that, even if though you might think it's not that big of a deal, so far I have 10,000 postcards that were done by individuals that have been posted and written. That's a huge contribution, a little bit at a time.
Little bit at a time. We're going to put that link directly in tonight's show notes, so everybody going to check it out. And look, one of the things I just want to say, like personally, it has been fantastic to see you down here in Upper Buck so often, right? I mean,
Oh,
because
thank you.
I mean, I remember. I mean, it was so funny. It's like I remember when we're still trying to figure out what the final maps were going to look like, right? And then finally, the 16th got kind of redrawn or whatever, and I'm trying to figure out, okay, what's going on. I can't tell you how many questions that I had from people, right? Because I got elected this past year to basically, I'm like the oh God, I forget what my official title is.
Like state committee, maybe? Or?
No, I'm like the election. I'm like of my precinct. I'm the election guy, right? The judge of elections. I'm the judge of elections of my precinct, right? So
Gotcha,
you know, and so when we had the primaries, right? We had to be prepared to kind of tell people, because you know, go to people to show up that they're not paying super close attention to politics, and suddenly the guy that they were there or the woman they're there to vote for suddenly isn't on the ballot. So you want to be able to help them kind of understand where the what the new district was and stuff like this. And then I started getting all these, you know, not as part of judge of elections, but just personally through doing this show, people trying to say, well, who's running? And I'm like, well, Mark Pinsley, you know, Mark. And I told him a little bit, because I had to know a little about your campaign in 2016, and I know a little about the work that you've been doing. And
Yep.
you know, I said, you know, you'll get to see him, and like literally, right? So I get these emails back. Oh, I just met him. Right? You know, he was down in my neighborhood, or he was at this rally. And I think that's meant a whole lot of people very early. You know, when those district lines got redrawn, you know, you didn't waste time to have you and your campaign kind of out there and kind of meeting people. So you know, hats off
thank
to
you.
you on that. It's meant a lot.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. You know, I will tell you, you know, it's interesting too because, you know, just in terms of the primary, Lehigh County was much worse to Pat Browne than Bucks County was. They're a little bit more moderate, I suppose. But I have found them to be, you know, Bucks County in particular is far more active, even though they have a harder time, even though they're more Republican, you know, in terms of registration. They are working their butts off, man. And I really appreciate, and it's not that we're not working our butts off up here, we are, but it's very different. And I really appreciate it. I really do.
Well, that's also great to hear. And I have to say, and all the hats go off to so many of the folks that got energized in part because of these school board elections that have really kind of shown what, you know, again, the stakes became very clear. Here in Penridge School District, where my kids are at, right, this is, you know, this last school board election, this was the second or third time round of dealing with some of these folks that were coming out. What's happening in Central Bucks, what's happening in kind of Palisades, what's happening again North Penn, all around this. That push has been really ramped up. And what people did when they went out and they organized around those school board elections, they didn't go away. Like literally the next day, they're saying like, okay, where do we need to go next? Who do we need to talk to? How do we keep this organization going? What do we need to do better? And those folks that you saw at that rally yesterday were those folks who have been there nonstop, kind of building out those structures, and you know have really been, you know, the nuts and bolts, and they've done it largely alone, right? I think it's like, you know, the state, or I would say the county and the statewide Democratic Party is catching up to those folks who've been doing their organizing on the ground now. And it's great to see that they're actually deciding we're not going to fight these folks. We're actually going to try to help them out because they're doing amazing jobs. So I know that they're going to appreciate the shout out tonight, Mark.
Yes. Yeah. Very good.
Well, great. Well, hey, thank you so much for taking the time tonight. And remember, everybody, you can check in the show notes. You're going to make sure that you head on over to Mark's website. If there's ways that you're going to help out, if you're up in Lehigh County, if you're up down here in Upper Bucks, I'm looking for ways to get involved. Lots of ways to get involved. Share out this show. Make people who don't get to know him so much, want to hear a little bit about his background, share out the show to folks so they can hear a little bit here. And we're going to make that available to any place that it needs to go. So thanks again, Mark, for
Thanks,
coming
Kevin.
out tonight.
I really appreciate it.
Oh, fantastic. Well, everybody, this is going to be one little quick note. Want to let everybody know, you know, I know it's been on and off for the show the past couple of weeks. I got sick. If you remember, I thought that I had COVID, but it turns out I didn't have COVID. I had a pretty nasty leg infection and a blood clot. So that turned out to be a little bit more serious than I would have hoped, but we got it under control now. So I just wanted to let everybody know that's what the deal was. I appreciate the messages, people asking how I was, making sure that everything was going on what was happening. So I really appreciate the thoughts, and I really appreciate everybody coming out tonight and helping sharing the show. So this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. Keep your eye on your medias, because we got some great shows coming up in the next couple of weeks. We got some more local candidates that will be coming out. We're probably going to be doing some shows in the middle of the week too as well, to make sure that we could put as much kind of amplification to the work that's going on the ground as we can. We'll let you know about when the next rallies are coming up, and keep it up, everybody. As you heard Mark, thanks to everybody who's doing the work out there on organizing, and we'll be talking to you soon. So this is Kevin Mahoney, this creator and founder of Raging Chicken. We're going to be seeing you next Monday. Might have a short Friday show. It's my daughter's birthday, so it's going to depend on her. Keep an eye on it. Thanks, everybody. Keep up the fight. Keep up the struggle. We'll see you soon. See ya!